the manufacturers of aircraft were protecting them pretty hard for a switch from a three-pilot crew to a two-pilot crew, and that got approved in the 70s. So Boeing was ahead of the game, and they were already doing research for that transition. In the 80s, they already had data to support for two different options. And so where we're at now is kind of just assessing both those options and looking at which one's going to be best for the overall project and get things going. Because as part of that win of the two pilot plane, their customers already had stated that they wanted a two pilot aircraft, so they had to get ahead of it. So and when we look at it, there was a couple of things that we were looking at in terms of both options. Because the first option was going to be an inline build, which meant that as part of their standard process, they would go through and insert the two pilot build in it, and then the offline build would be retroactive. So, but for both of them, because Boeing was ahead of the game, they always bought their parts in advance. They always had spare parts. There wasn't going to be additional parts or scrap pieces as a result of either option. The other thing is in terms of cost and them making things happen, take back. In terms of like the research and experts, they spent years and they spent, prepping for what they needed, and their experts and their engineers, had different options, and they knew how to be able to adapt to the different things that happened in their processes. They had very great foresight because they would analyze it well in advance. When we take a look at the inline build, though, specifically what was comfortable for them was things to be in line because it wasn't outside of the normal practice. So engineers felt more comfortable with this type of process. The other thing was in terms of the overall process itself, and to all their workers, it would be one single installation. It would just be natural to their tradition, like to the way that they normally operated. And then the last one was that that you don't have to step outside of your comfort zone. And as you know, like whenever you talk about teams, like when you start asking people to step outside of their comfort zone, that's where it hurts morale, and you can have more errors as a result of it. But when you take a look at the offline build, even though you have the planes, built and then going through and add the two pilot after, there wasn't going to be any production delays because things were going to continue as normal. And additionally, their learning curve, like they would be able to learn more or continue to learn more and figure out how to continue to improve based on their processes from their experience. But the one that weighed out the most heavily was going to be the testing aspect, because there'd be multiple testing points for them, which meant that in terms of when they handed off their product to their customer, that customer would have a solid product. And of course, when you talk about manufacturers, you don't ever want to have to worry about a product that could potentially have flaws, especially when you're talking about something that potentially, of course, could impact lives. So, when we look at in terms of cons, they had similarities, just like with the pros. Just a couple of them. It was going to be labor intensive. It was going to be cost intensive. That there was going to be problems with the structural integrity. In terms of one aspect or another, but those are things that that we're going to impact them regardless. But when we talk about more so the offline build, the things that in terms of cost and we're not going to really hurt so much. We're going to be the time and money towards getting additional space and making some things happen with arranging of I want to say fire marshals to make to make the additional space to get that insert put in. But in terms of the inline build, that meant that the testing would be fractured because you'd be testing at different points within the process. You'd have to go through and draft new plans, and you wouldn't be able to have any takeaways and learning opportunities from it. Because when we go with the offline build, one of the biggest things we talked about, or with the inline build, is engineers were going to feel comfortable. Your people were going to feel comfortable because that's standard. So with going with the offline build, one of the heavier aspects for the action plan was going to be communication. So that meant on the next slide that you'd have to really go to the next slide and make sure that you talk to everyone. And make sure you talk to everyone, you have this type of communication, you're being very thorough and meticulous about sharing the research and sharing how things are gonna be more effective going the route that we're going. And not only sharing what that plan is, but why, because that's where you're gonna get that bigger buy-in for this is the right thing to do, to where it doesn't impact motivation. And of course go through and check at multiple stages to ensure that the information was passed from top to bottom. Additionally, in terms of making this offline build happen, there was going to be some coordinating and some planning to happen there to get things moving, to make it seamless. Because even though it's going to impact time, you're going to have to work with third parties to make things happen. So that means as part of project management, you're going to have to build out additional timelines and coordination with them to find out what they could commit to and incorporate that into the plan. And then be effectively, be involved, very heavily in terms of making things happen. You got to make sure that throughout the process, you're checking, you're trying to see whether or not you have to make any adjustments and be flexible, because every project you got to realize you got to put in buffer room. You can't just expect things to go off without a hitch. And then make sure we do the testing, the testing that we were saying that we're going to commit to make the overall product a stellar product. And so